Welcome back to One Bills Live, hour number 2 here on a Buffalo Football Tuesday after the Monday night win over the Jets, 23-20. Pleased to welcome in now ESPN NFL analyst Dan Orlovsky, whose appearance on One Bills Live is presented by Caesars Sportsbook, an official mobile sports betting partner of the Buffalo Bills. All right, Dan, you were in the house last night, and I have to say, right from the jump, the physical tone set by Buffalo's offensive line and rookie running back Ray Davis, it turned the game on its ear. I mean, even Dalton Kincaid with the catch and run where he absolutely railroads a defensive back. I mean, the Bills bench was jumping early. You could tell there was a physical tone to be set by them.
I think the whole football team, I think it's fair to say that was the most physical game that the Bills have played this season, and certainly the offensive line, the most physically dominant game that they have played this season. This is, I was part of the Monday Night Football game, and when they kind of bullied and did whatever they wanted to versus Jacksonville, this is a different animal. This is a really, really, really good defense. And I thought the interior of their offensive line and the displacement of the defensive tackles for the Jets was the story of the football game. I thought that the way that they made the Jets tackle them was the story of the football game. And Chris, to your point, it was everybody. I mean, Ray Davis was tremendous, no question. But to your point, Kincaid, he made him tackle him. Keon, Matt Collins, Shakir, like everyone was saying, Ty Johnson, you got to tackle us. And I honestly believe that they won the physical battle across the board. And then defensively, I mean, they got after the Jets offensive line. You saw some plays that, listen, from a quarterback's perspective, I say catch the football, that are drops, but you do have to, the one of the end zone to Garrett Wilson, tip your hat because there was a physical. Taylor Rapp was a violent football player last night. So yeah, it was across the board for me.
I thought it was really interesting. I didn't notice it when they first started the Bills' opening offensive drive. 9 plays, 8 runs.
Yep.
1 pass, and the one pass was the Kincaid run and smash mouth finish. I was really surprised the Bills were able to do that. And you said it was the interior of the offensive line that upped their game a little bit. I get the total look of this ball game. This is kind of what it's going to look like against a good defense for this Bills offense, right? I mean, it's going to be a little bit sloppy and mucky, and if they're going to need to run the football because they're not going to be the slick juggernaut offense they've been in years past.
No, I think one, because of the personnel that they have, 2, because of the style of defenses that are consistently going to be played against them, and I think that's really the impressive part with Joe Brady now is, Joe has kind of had the foresight to realize this was going to happen. And this is how they really had to play. And, I think the thing that's really impressive, Steve, is, listen, they have not played well offensively in 2 weeks. Now, I thought the Baltimore game was worse than the Houston game. The Houston game, we talked about it. There were just some misses down the field that you sit there and go, if you hit 2 of them, you win the game. But I think the most impressive thing when it comes to their offensive performance last night for me was, and you mentioned the first drive, it wasn't trying to trick the Jets. They got into kind of the formations that they get into, and they put a 6th offensive lineman on, and you watch them run I think it was their first snap duo, where they just get double teams, and they go, Sauce, you going to tackle? Nope. And then they got into a relatively similar formation. They ran outside zone weak and said, are you going to stand up to the double team? Nope. And then they ran zone weak out of a bunch. Are you going? So I think that was, sometimes I do love the creative element of offensive football more than anybody probably in the industry that I'm in. But I also have an immense appreciation for this is it. Okay. And here comes stop it. And if you can, awesome. And if you can't, we're just going to continue to do it until you prove to us that you're capable of it. And then, 3 or 4 plays by that MVP candidate quarterback, and it's a way to win a game.
Yeah, and I would say the biggest difference with Josh, too, from what we had seen the previous 2 weeks, settled, comfortable, in command, in charge, and I thought it had a calming influence in a manner of speaking. It was a charged-up offense, don't get me wrong, but a collected, hey, we're on task here, let's just execute, as opposed to the sped-up internal clock, frenetic eyes darting left and right Josh Allen that we saw the last 2 weeks. Can you just, having been a former quarterback yourself, crawl into Josh's head a little bit and just explain why sometimes those games happen where the timing of everything is off, you feel hurried, you feel rushed, and you can't execute? Why do you see those differences from week to week sometimes, even in veteran quarterbacks like Josh?
Yeah, I think specifically to Josh, he certainly is an adrenaline junkie, and he loves to live on the line, and that's what makes him great in many ways. And so he can get caught up in that at times. I think too, he's very aware that he is one of the very best players in the NFL, and in the conversation for one of the two best quarterbacks in the NFL. So there's the mindset of, well, I don't really care what the defense does at times, and I don't care who they are or who they have. I'm better, and I'll go make a play. And I think he sometimes walks the line perfectly. He sometimes doesn't have to cross the line, and sometimes he does. And when his eyes get all over the place and when he plays so sped up, I do think that there's a part of him that sees the defense and he starts to think about, okay, if they're doing this, I know this should probably be what I do with the football, but if I can get somebody to do this, and then if I might have that really good throw back there, that might be the big play. And so, yeah, there is a part of him that still chases the big play. I think it's less and less more often than not. I mean, even I'm trying to think of the big play that he makes to Davis down the field when he gets out. It's really the huge play. I think it's in the second quarter and is backed up in the own end zone.
Yep.
And he gets out to his right. I mean, he's got Matt Collins out to his right for like an 8-yard throw, and Mac's kind of there by himself. But it's who he is. He wants to go make a big play.
Oh yeah, we know.
If you, it's almost like it's a horror movie in a way where, if there's that glimmer of hope or glimmer of chance, Josh is going to take it. And listen, it works out more often than not.
Right, not to go too much away from the Bills, but where do the Jets land on this? They traded for Davante Adams this morning. That deal's going to get done. Is Davante Adams a magic elixir that's going to fix what's going on with the Jets?
He certainly helps. I would say this, Steve, and I know that I'm on with you guys. I don't all that disagree with Aaron's comments post-game, that in a way they gave the game away. I mean, 2 missed field goals and a ton of penalties. The Garrett Wilson, whether you call it a drop in the end zone or a great play by the defense, the interception late by Taron, if Mike Williams doesn't slip and he's kind of where he's supposed to be, I think he's going to go up and make that catch just because of his physical size. So I don't think, and I've felt this way for a couple weeks now, that this is panic mode, we aren't good New York Jets situation. The number one thing that they have to do is they have to get more into details offensively. They have to, and defensively. You saw some of the PIs, but more into details. I think that there was a much better flow and scheme last night for them. They created, easier opportunities for execution for their offense. But do not make any mistake about it. This is a massive addition for their football team. I mean, the Ravens have 2 losses, and one of them is because of Davante Adams. I mean, he took over a football game late. So I don't think that this is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers getting Antonio Brown or the Rams getting OBJ when it comes to, I thought those teams were better than the Jets are right now. But the impact that those guys can have, or that Devonte can have, is very similar to the impact that those 2 players brought to those Super Bowl winning teams for sure.
You mentioned him, so I'll ask you to elaborate. I mean, we've talked about all the missing starters from Buffalo's defense. I mean, last week against the Texans, they played without 5 defensive starters. They get Rapp back. You saw the impact he made last night. And then you get the all-pro back, Taron Johnson at nickel corner. And I know he makes the big play at the end of the game to seal it, but his effect in the run front is, for a man that's 192 pounds, he's unbelievable.
It is fair to say he's the best run-stopping nickel defender in the NFL. And he has been. Listen, he has been for years. He just doesn't get enough credit for it. And there are moments when he gets mismatches and teams will run at him and he's got to take on a 330-pound offensive lineman, no question. But, man, he is so good. Chris, if you when I watch games, I write down, the games and the teams, and then I just write down the plays that stand out to me and I categorize them. And there's 4 separate clips of Taron in the run game that I've written down. I write second quarter, 13:37. Taron Johnson makes a play. Taron Johnson, unbelievable dip under the block. He's just a special player. And I would say this, you really feel it when it's him and Bernard together. Like when they both are on the field, you really feel it in the run game. The way that they have unbelievable instincts, whether it's a run or a pass or play action, and they trigger faster than the offensive lineman. The way that they can dip under or avoid blocks, but not give up the integrity of the run defense, it's really impressive. It really is. And he is a vital part of their football team. I thought the Jets would be able, without Ed, to really have a ton of success running the football up inside. And they had moments, no doubt, but not as much as I thought.
Yeah, you saw the one play where the Jets pulled the left guard out and around, and Taron actually got called on a penalty for getting a low block. As you could see it. It was really illustrated well on the replay what Taron is up against when he's a nickelback trying to be in the run game. He steps up into that gap, and it's a 300-pound guard coming in that he's got to take on and beat. So he goes low, gets called for the low block, and it's a penalty. But that's kind of what teams are trying to do when the Bills stay in that nickel.
Yep.
They pull a big guy around on Taron to try and get the mismatch blocking wise. And in that case, Taron actually made a pretty good play, but he got called as a penalty because he went low. That's what teams do, and that's what Taron has had success defending, and which is the amazing part of what he does.
Yeah, I'm candidly, I'm surprised more teams don't do it. I remember, I don't know, I think it was last year or 2 years ago when Minnesota, that was a huge thing that Minnesota did up there. I'm surprised more teams don't do it. Listen, I think that, when we live in a world in the NFL where like we only talk about perimeter players, like who's the best corner. If you don't, that's why one of the things that stands out about Buffalo's defense, if you don't have a nickel that can be and do it all guy all the time, I think it's really hard to play good offenses. And Taron absolutely is one of those transformative players on their defense.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned him and Bernard as a tandem. Just imagine when Milano gets back in December. I mean, that's the second line of their defense, and it's unbelievable across the board.
No doubt.
It's just a shame they're missing Milano. The passing game, Dan, to your point, some of the best plays last night are delivered off script when Josh makes something special happen. Your play that you referenced to Ray Davis from the end zone, the touchdown pass to Knox is off script and extending the play again. How concerned are you about the structure and functionality of Buffalo's passing game another week into the season here? I mean, we talked last week about separation and those kinds of things, but where are you now?
Yeah, I am not overly concerned about it. I'm not. I think the only game that it really showed itself for me was Baltimore. And when, I'll go back to Houston last week. There were moments of lack of separation. There is for every offense in the NFL. But there were also 3 or 4 or 5 throws where Josh should make down the field with guys open, and he just didn't make them. And so I thought last night, you saw – you're never going to have a full football game with Josh where he just constantly has to play from the pocket. He's always going to go try and create, and defenses are going to give him the opportunity. And, especially as you get into this middle to the back half of the season, and I think this is a playoff football team. I've remained adamant that they're my team to win the division. I don't care who he plays against. He's going to have the chance to go make plays. I think you're starting to see, okay, what is Keon good at? Like, what is Keon good at? What are the things that he can do? I don't think you want Keon to stop that much and be a refined route runner. What is Khalil good at? You want him to stop a ton. You want him to be a refined and detailed route runner. You saw Kincaid get the ball more in space, maybe not dominating in one-on-ones, but formations and in space. Dawson, a part of it. So I maybe I'm in the minority. I am not overly concerned with their lack of dominant separator.
Yeah, because I saw them using Curtis Samuel down the field a little bit more last night for the first time this season, where, it's like, oh, there he is down the field, like more than 10 yards down the field, not the gimmicky stuff around the line of scrimmage.
Sure.
The guy runs a 4.31. Like, there's a guy that can probably separate on a deep corner. And he beats the guy in the end zone. Josh just overthrows him, but he's there for a touchdown. I want to see more of him down the field. I'm not saying he's the end-all, be-all answer, but I think you might get a couple of more answers a game if you have him run deeper down the field.
Yeah, I agree. And MVS as well. MVS is a guy that has the ability to be a vertical player. I think that's kind of one of the things that has gotten lost in a little bit of this conversation, because and I get people's vantage point on it and perspective of it. I completely do, and I understand it, because you compare it to, Houston, who's got some really good players, and Cincinnati, who's got some really good players. When you have an offensive line, and I've gotten into some arguments with people about their belief about the Bills' offensive line, and my belief is, like, when you have a good offensive line, you don't need a ton of guys to go win, because the good offensive line is going to make the guys on the perimeter better. And so I do think that there's people that are, they're trying to figure out roles for every guy and what that guy is good at, and let's just have him do that a ton. And I do believe that they're figuring this out or that out as the weeks go on.
Last one about Tennessee for me,
right.
And you can ask one too, Steve. But Tennessee, obviously they can't score points. 31st in total offense. They're an abomination on that side of the ball, but number one passing defense in football, number one defense in football. How much is Buffalo's offense going to find some tough sledding this week against this Tennessee team?
Yeah, it's a good unit. I mean, if not for really subpar quarterback play, you're probably looking at at worst 3-win, if not 4-win football team. There's a couple of things that stand out about Tennessee's defense. One, it's probably the best interior defensive line that they're going to play. Simmons and Sweat, who's the young man they took out of Texas.
Yeah,
they're unbelievable, and Sweat is playing at an outrageously high level. And so him and Simmons together are just very difficult to handle. Their edges are still good, but I do think that Buffalo offensively has to play on the perimeter this week in both the run game and in the pass game. Now, their defensive coordinator, Denard Wilson, he was with Philly for a little bit, but he came directly from Baltimore. So this offense in Buffalo is going to see a lot of the similar stuff that they saw from Baltimore. They're going to put a top on the defense. They're going to play with that umbrella coverage. They're going to try to match everything. You're going to get simulated pressures and bodies moving all over the place. They don't have a player like Kyle Hamilton that Baltimore does. Now, their nickels are a really good player, and they can cover on the back end. Quandre Diggs is all over the field, so Josh is going to have to be really good knowing where Quandre is at all times, because he's a ball hawk. The big thing about, like, the philosophy of the game here, Chris, is like, let's just be really clean. Let's be very efficient. We have to be really smart and make Will Levis in that offense beat you. And I think if Buffalo and Josh have that philosophy, they're going to play on the perimeter, get the ball out very quickly, make this defense. You're not going to hit a ton of big plays unless they're broken. They'll be okay.
Yeah, and we've talked about how the Bills' offense looks different, feels different than it did a year ago with Diggs and certainly much different than it did back in 2020, 21 when they were throwing it all over the joint. But this one thing that I have to say about this offense, Josh has yet to throw a pick in 6 games in this season, which is
don't say that out loud, Steve.
Right.
Everyone
well,
else,
we're talking about we're
You
speaking it because it's too much. Here's the thing: if they can play Tennessee, and really it comes down to me, Tennessee is not good enough to win without help, offensively particularly.
Correct.
And if Josh does,
Correct.
if they don't get any more possessions than they deserve, and if they continue to turn the ball over like they have, they're up against it, no matter what happens offensively for Buffalo. And that's the basics, the bare bones of this. The Bills have done an outstanding job of not turning the football over, grinding out victories. Certainly this win in New York was an ugly win, but even if they had hung on and won in Houston, it would have been extremely ugly. But that's the way it's going to be. And if this Bills team continues not to help their opponent beat them, they're just too much to handle for most of these teams. Not all of them, but most of them.
No, absolutely. And they're still a very talented football team that's only, reality is hopefully going to get more talented as the season goes on because of their young players are going to develop, and maybe they'll get a little bit healthier rather than some of the injuries that they've dealt with at the beginning of the season. Tennessee offensively, when you watch them play, it's very clear that they're a good run team. Pollard's really good. The left side of their offensive line's really good. The Callahan family's operating that offense. So they're going to try to run the football, and they'll be good at it. And you'll see a lot of different run schemes. That's one of the things that will challenge Buffalo. And then they are going to take shots. They are going to sit there and try to launch the ball downfield. So it'll be really important for that. But I totally agree. Buffalo's playing in a very disciplined style right now. And that's going to be hard to beat when, it's a combination of discipline yet high-end talent, specifically with Josh.
Dan, thanks for the time as always. We appreciate it. We'll catch up with you next week.
Thanks, guys.